Hi, welcome back. Last time we were talking about making sure that our simulation didn't have negative bikes. We did that by checking to see when a person comes, whether there's a bike available. If there is, they take it, move it to the other location. If there isn't, they end up saying, "Oh, I can't do it. I guess I just won't take a bike." Now, from a company point of view, having somebody arrive and not have a bike available for them could be a problem. That's a lost customer currently, it's a lost customer over time. So, as a as a person interested in this bike share, we may want to keep track of how many times somebody comes to try to get a bike and there's no bikes available. I guess we could call that an unsatisfied customer. So we could ask the question, how many times does a person come, does a person, a potential customer, arrive and there are no bikes available? All right, so realize, just as we've talked about before, so this is a metric. It's some data we can collect about our system, and this piece of data, we need to figure out how we might code it into our system to be able to keep track of it. So here's the lowdown, right? To keep track of metrics, to do this, you have to first include a variable, and maybe we'll just say it's a new variable, for what we are counting. In the state object. So that's going to be our placeholder to keep track of something that's changing over time. So just like the number of bikes at each location is something that changes over time, we're also going to keep track of this value, the number of unsatisfied customers. We're going to keep track of that over time. And then the second thing is we need to include code that keeps track of how the metric changes in the places in the code, in the code locations where it can be tracked. All right, so in terms of this metric, we'll create two new state variables. All right, and we'll call them Olin empty and Wellesley empty. So those are going to go into our bag of objects. That's our state object, along with how many people, how many bikes there are currently at Olin, and how many there are currently at Wellesley. Remember, those are Olin and Wellesley. So now our state object has 4 things in it, not just 2. All right, and we'll set them both to be 0. We'll set them both to be 0 at time 0. So, and what we need to do is, in the code, when the simulation would change these metrics, we create code to do it. All right, and then once we'll talk about doing that, but then after all the simulation is happening, so after running the simulation, then evaluate bike share dot empty and bike share dot empty to see how many times there was nothing available for the users, to see how many unsatisfied customers there were at each location. All right, so let's go back to our code from last time, and let's look at how this problem, which is now a feature and not a bug, is being simulated. We have this problem that occurs when we try to send a bike from Olin to Wellesley, but there's no bikes available at Olin. And we'd said that happens exactly here in our code. We check to see if state.olin is equal to 0. Remember, equals equals is like a question mark. So if there are no bikes at Olin, before we say don't do anything and go back and don't do anything to our simulation, we need to put in here that state dot, so Olin was empty, so state dot Olin empty, add 1 to that, plus equals 1. So we put that extra line in here, extra line of code right here in this if statement. If there's no bikes at Olin, we keep track of that. And then we go back to our simulation where no bikes have moved, and we wait. And maybe this gets called again, because in the next minute somebody else shows up and says, I really want a bike. Oh darn, there's no bikes. In that case, we would add 1 more to Olin empty.